Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight, and thanks for being here early. Help spread the word that we are going early. When both of you are, when your spouses and co-hosts, babysitting becomes a problem. But we have a very, very good show planned for you tonight. This show has been months in the making. This show was done by many researchers. Of course, the number one researcher is Dr. John here, who's going to give us a psychological breakdown or analysis or answer our many questions. And we're here to answer your questions about Zulema Pastenes. Zulema Pastenes is a player in the Lori and Chad Daybell case. I'm going to share a few facts about her. And while I do, if you could hit the subscribe button and also like this video. And again, let your friends know we're going live now and share their questions. So here are a few things about Zulema Pastenes. Although I think that I just lost the sheet. So why don't you go ahead first, John? For those that are new to our channel, because they've been following the Excelsior Springs case, this is about the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell case out of Idaho and Rexburg. Zulema was a believer and follower of a cult, and she was with this small cult or group of people, believing and texting them throughout some of the most frightening times during the days where people were murdered. So that is who Zulema is. She's not been charged with anything, but that's who we're going to talk about today.
So I think one of the big questions that seems to come up repeatedly about Zulema is, to what degree was she involved in this group? And to what degree was she making decisions, or how much did she know? Right? Those types of questions are similar to the questions that people asked about Melanie Gibb. So I think there's a somewhat similar interest or curiosity or fascination about Zulema, because she's sort of this fringe character, and yet nobody really believes that she's fringe because she contradicts herself a lot, and she just doesn't. She's an enigma. She just doesn't add up, right? So she's a little difficult to figure out. I will say that, but I think the mystery surrounding her is one of the reasons that people are so fascinated by her, and we'll have that discussion tonight.
Should I start by sharing a few factoids about Zulema?
Sure.
First off, she has been married 6 times. On our Patreon episode the other day, we mentioned she'd been married 7 times, so we were one off. 6 times, 6 husbands. Alex Cox was her 6th husband. She has 3 children. She is in her 50s. She was not always LDS. She's a convert to the LDS church. Zulema was under the belief that she was being protected by an angel who was the deceased president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, David O. McKay. In texts with Lori, Zulema frequently referred to Chad as James or JTL, James the Lesser. We have all of their texts. By the way, we posted them all, 107 pages, a PDF file in our Patreon account for those that want to read all of these texts. Zulema claimed to have a thinner veil. So we have Julie Rowe, who has no veil. We've had Chad, who has a ripped veil. Zulema has a thinner veil. So we have all these descriptions. She has had visions and dreams since she was a child. And then as she got older, she realized they were warnings for the future. Zulema was told by Chad that he was told by God that she was to marry Alex Cox. Alex Cox is the brother of Lori Vallow Daybell. That is actually what puts her on the infamous list of this Daybell case, is that she married Alex Cox, who is now deceased. She married him right before. Ian Pulowski told police that Zulema believed she could control natural disasters, and he said that she further believed an earthquake would occur in Salt Lake City in July 2020, which would begin the war of good versus evil. Julie Clement, another friend, identified herself as a spiritual healer for Lori, Chad, and Zulema. The casting meetings, where they would try to cast out evil spirits from Charles or Tammy. Those often happened at Zulema's house. Zulema describes Chad like everyone else as reserved, shy, humble, how wrong everyone was. And at one point, Lori told the casting meeting women they needed to be careful what they said around Alex because he was a first creation. They did not understand as much. But then Lori did change her direction. And after telling them giving doctorate to him was like giving a candy bar to a kindergartner, now all of a sudden he became a multiple creation being who had been exalted. And his only purpose on earth was to be Lori's defender and protector. But of course, Chad and Lori also decided that that Zulema's mission was also to marry Alex Cox, and they were to move to Rexburg, Idaho. Those are a few things. So, hello, everyone. With that being said, do you want to start with a soundbite we have, John?
Let's start with that, please.
We're going to learn what's hidden about Zulema Pastenes from forensic psychologist Dr. John Matthias, also known as Babe.
I think of it in my mind as like an aquarium, and when you go your hand on the bottom, and then all of a sudden all this stuff comes up. So it's the stuff that comes up.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, brings up
all kinds of stuff, and doubt and memories, and and connections, and then you let it out,
Yeah. No, I get it.
And then you just like start beating yourself up because how could I ever done anything like this, or get involved with people like this, and how could I be deceived so much, and how could I be so stupid?
Well, don't beat yourself up.
all that comes up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
How did you know that this is what you wanted to do, to serve the world? And have you always known it?
So, I grew up always knowing that there was something I was supposed to do, but I didn't know what it was. And at times I used to look at people and they used to say, well, what do you want to be? And, they would have an answer immediately. They would like say, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a teacher, I want to be this. And I used to look at them and go, how do you know that? Like, how did you get to that realization that you wanted to know that? Because I didn't. I knew there was something out there for me, but I just never knew what it was.
Should I keep going or leave there?
I thought there was another piece to that.
Yes,
first
one more.
Okay.
I think the first one for me was being able to know who I was. That was my first limitation. I didn't grow up with people telling me that I was a child of God. I didn't grow up people telling me that I was beautiful or that I was powerful. Not that they said you're ugly or you're not powerful, but with their behaviors and the way that I was treated as I was growing up, that I was told you have no voice. When they didn't hear me or listen to me, right, they told me you have no voice, you have no power, okay? You're powerless, okay? From the time that I was very, very young. And as you and I have spoke with each other before, I grew up in a house that I was there was so much anger. There was yelling, screaming, and cussing all the time, and once in a while, there was physical abuse. And there was also, my stepfather that was, a pedophile, and he molested me from the time that I was very, very young. I can't even remember some of those things that happened. So one of my first memories is being frozen with fear when they were going to check my eyes because I was getting headaches all the time. And I was frozen with fear because I was thinking that the doctor was going to be able to see in my eyes, and he was going to be able to see that I was a liar, right? And that he might know that I wasn't clean and that I was, that I was, dirty. And what if I was pregnant? Mind you, I was only like maybe 7, 8 years old.
those recordings, one was her police interview in 2021. The one where it was a podcast was in 2016, well before she knew Chad, when she was just describing her sexual abuse there and her life. So we should have made that description as well. So we played from her police interview in 2021 and then a podcast in 2016 before she ever knew Melanie Gibb, Lori, or Chad.
So I hope everyone could hear those clips, because I think there's so much in there that really opens the door to understanding Zulema. So what we learned from the clips is that Zulema feels like she has no voice, that she's powerless as a child. She grows up in a home with a lot of anger, a lot of probably domestic violence. She was physically abused. She was sexually abused. Her father, she says, is a pedophile, meaning that potentially he had crimes in that area or other victims. She's afraid that if she goes to the doctor will see that she's being abused or that she's dirty. And she's worried that it'll be discovered that she's pregnant at 7 or 8 years old. So starting with that, I think I'd like to say that when I heard that, I felt a lot of empathy and compassion for Zulema. I think Zulema is someone who's very lost, and she's been lost for a long time. The 6 marriages, I think, would be evidence of that, in addition to jumping, to different cults and different groups and trying to figure out who she is for many, many years. But I think you have to go back to the abuse to really start to uncover what's going on here. And so you have a young girl who's being raped, essentially, and she feels powerless, like many victims of abuse. And she really, from that moment forward, I think she really struggles to figure out who she is or what her place is in the world. And so that sets the stage for everything. I think you'd have to argue that there's probably an insecure attachment, which we talk a lot about, but an insecure attachment essentially means that Zulema doesn't feel safe. She doesn't trust the world. She doesn't feel safe. She probably has a lot of insecurity about who she is and what she's going to do. And that was also a part of one of the clips you played. Is in the podcast in 2016, she says, I knew there was a place for me in the world, but I didn't know what that was. And
Right.
She was seeing all these other people start to find their identities, but she struggled with it, and she never really did. And so I think that opens the door for entering a group like Chad Daybell's, entering a cult. I think cults largely exist, they prey on people like Zulema. They're seeking people that are lost, that have a poor identity or a nebulous identity. They're looking for people to develop some sense of belonging and some sense of purpose. And I think this particular group gave Zulema all of that. There's a book called Terror, Love, and Brainwashing by Alexandra Stein, who's done a lot of research on cults. And her argument is essentially that cults appeal to people with insecure attachments precisely for the reasons I just mentioned, because they're trying to, many people that enter cults are trying to go back and get that sense of security that they never had as a child. And cults offer a pseudo, and I say pseudo because it's not a real loving environment necessarily, but they offer a pseudo environment that promises to heal all those wounds and to mend those disrupted attachments from childhood. So I think you see that here. And I'll get into something else in a little bit, which was the first soundbite you played about. Zulema says, my mind is like an aquarium. I thought that was fascinating. I've heard a lot of people discuss how they see their minds. An aquarium is not one of them, by the way. So typically, if you ask people to give a description or a metaphor for their mind, they'll say something like, well, it's like a library. I've got all these memories that are like books and I go retrieve them, or it's like a computer. I have memories. I store and I get them back. Right? They use some type of metaphor that describes something to do with memory. I think most psychologists agree that identity is closely aligned with memory. And so when you think about an aquarium, I think that's fascinating because an aquarium has no memory. An aquarium is just a bunch of water with objects in it. And she says, in her analogy, she says that if you stir the aquarium up or if you push the stuff from the bottom, it comes up. So what she's saying essentially, what I heard her say, or what I would interpret it as her saying that she basically has limited memories. She sort of exists in the present like an aquarium. And only when things are stirred up, only when there's turmoil or stress, do these traumatic memories come up, and that disturbs her. Otherwise, she just tries to kind of live in this state of being present and the state of having no memory and the state of being present with God or whatever she feels connected to, maybe the cult. But it's a really fascinating view for me of how she sees her mind, which is to say, during these interviews, she's always saying, I don't remember, I forgot. Like she's constantly struggling to give a coherent account to the investigators. The investigators, one of the detectives asked her, well, you were the point person for a lot of these calls. Why were you the point person? And she says, no reason. I don't really remember. I don't know. Yeah. That's an aquarium. That's
Well, I have that. Should I play that? Oh, no, you're talking about what we played already. Right.
Right. And so she doesn't really have an identity. And I think that's the problem here is that it's very easy for people to see Zulema the way they want to see because she's so lost herself. And so I think the Daybell group is a group of people that's trying to give her a voice, trying to give her a sense of power. The things she talked about in the podcast that she lacked, she's trying to get those from the Daybell group. So there's also research showing some connections, and this isn't perfect, like all social science research, it's imperfect, but there's some connection between childhood trauma and later personality disorders. I wouldn't want to speculate exactly if she has a personality disorder, but that's possible. So I'm looking at the question here. Can you read that? Oh, are you on mute?
I was mute. Sorry.
Okay.
Karen Michelle says, I really struggle with this, not in an argumentative way. We just have family with a trauma-related attachment disorder, and it's hard to figure out when it's no longer an excuse for damaging behavior.
I wouldn't look at it as an excuse so much as not really doing the work to figure out who she is. The issue isn't the trauma and dealing with the trauma. The issue is how the trauma becomes a part of who she is and how she defines herself as a result of that. In her podcast, she actually says something to the effect of, well, I had this trauma and I overcame it because I accepted God as the source of everything. So that's one way of dealing with it, is basically to place your identity in the hands of God. But I think to really have an identity in that context, you have to struggle with what that trauma was to you and what it meant and how you overcame it and how it defines you. And I don't believe she's done that. I think it's not, you can use trauma as an excuse, but I think what's going on here is she's not using it as an excuse so much as the trauma has defined her in a way that she can't define. It's defined her identity in a way that she hasn't been able to develop. So she really struggles to know who she is and what she stands for and what she wants. I mean, when you've had 6 marriages, something's gone wrong, clearly.
Right. Yeah. And Leanna's saying maybe that's why she became a life coach and cuddler. Everyone, send your questions in. We had a bunch of questions on Patreon, and I'll start reading some of those. And while I do that, go ahead, everyone, and send your questions in. And then, John, you let me know when you want me to play the next sound bites, or if you want me to ask a couple questions from Patreon. There's some good ones on there.
Whenever you want. I don't know that. I know that might have been a little. That introduction might have been a little abstract. So maybe I can help bring that more to life with some questions.
Great. Okay. Kate Fitzgerald says, Zulema strikes me as a grifter. She's smart enough to say whatever integrates her and her marks and knows when to lawyer up when things get dicey. I doubt she believes in anything. From her text messaging with Alex, I think she had a pretty good idea what would happen to Tylee. I think she's referring there, side note, this is me now, the dark portal text. She said Alex texted her about Tylee being a dark portal and that he needed to do something about it. Back to Kate's comment. I think she has a pretty good idea of what would happen to Tylee. My question would be, what was in it for Zulema? What was her end game here?
I think the things I just talked about a little bit, I think she had a real sense of belonging and a real sense of power in this group. When Chad essentially tells her, you can manipulate the elements, you can create earthquakes and stop hurricanes and all that kind of stuff, that's certainly assigning a certain amount of power to someone. And I think she felt special. She says this later too. She says that she was drawn into this group because she felt special, and that Chad would give her blessings all the time. And that when Chad stopped calling, for example, and he stopped calling Melanie Gibb, they felt lost. They felt like there was no guidance. And so I think that's a big clue to this too, is that she got a lot of attention. Chad and Lori would tell her that hers was the most important mission in the group. And I think she felt very special. So she felt a sense of belonging. She felt a sense of power. She felt very unique and special. And she says in the podcast at one point from 2016 that what she wanted more than anything was other people's attention. So she was getting a lot of attention.
Yeah. Let me tell you. And by the way, these are questions from when we shared all of the texts. Again, we have 107 texts shared with Zulema on our Patreon account, patreon.com/hidden true crime. If a mod can share that Patreon account. And we also have the full podcast that we were playing here from 2016, a 45-minute podcast of Zulema for those interested in hearing. And I'm also going to share all of the factoids. I have them in a nice spreadsheet later tonight. So that's on Patreon. Somebody else, Brenda, asks on Patreon, I'm curious as to why and how Zulema could believe she has any capacity to influence Mother Nature and natural disasters. Is this a personality disorder? Is it delusions, brainwashing, or something else entirely?
I think a big part of it's cultural. She's in this group, and the group Chad is telling her that she can manipulate the elements. Chad's telling her she's special. Chad's giving her a mission, which is that she's supposed to marry Alex, and that it's not clear what her mission is, by the way, but I think part of her mission has something to do with the elements. So I think she's sort of induced into believing it because she's in this culture and this group that wants to believe it and that talks about it all the time. So I think a big part of it is the group. I also think that she's a little gullible. I think that she sees herself as a healer. She sees herself as someone who's spiritually special. So I think she's more suggestible. She's more likely to believe that kind of stuff. So clearly it's a type of role playing, I think, definitely. But I think that's why she's believing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Karen Michelle, thank you so much for your generous donation. We always love having you here. She is a wonderful listener, and she has become a wonderful friend. It's good to see you, Karen. And Anna, thank you so much as well. It means a lot to us. Thank you so much. Ozzy Tat says, so many pray to deities and expect they're listening and will find their car keys, save their children, or make it rain. I like that, Ozzy Tad. Janet says, on paper, it makes sense what you're saying, but how does she get from feeling broken to murder being acceptable?
You'd have to argue that Zulema, I think that's an interesting question, because I think Zulema would argue that she didn't know anything about the murders. There's a lot of contradictory evidence about whether she did, by the way. Some of the texts certainly implied that she had some knowledge of Charles's murder, but
yeah,
Zulema, I think, would say that she didn't know what was going to happen, and therefore she was not culpable for the murders. So that's a little bit of a tricky question, because I think it depends maybe on who you ask. If you ask me, I would say that, Zulema's a lot like Melanie Gibb in the sense that she knows a lot more than she's admitting to or letting on. And does she know about the murders? I think it's highly possible, but she's not acknowledging that.
Yeah. Let me read something else. Denise Blodgett. We love Denise. I personally believe that Zulema knew about the murders of JJ and Tylee before they were committed. Since she is a mother, why didn't she try to convince Lori and Chad not to hurt them, or at least contact the authorities?
I think, again, this would go back to the cult issue. I think she felt caught up in this group and a part of it, and many people aren't going to stand up when they're part of a cult or part of a group. They're going to simply go along with the program and not question things. And Zulema is definitely more of a follower than a leader, I think. So no matter how extreme things got, and maybe this gets to Janet's question too, how do you go from feeling broken to murder? You get caught up in a movement or a cult that condones murder, and you don't object or question it. There's something called the innocent bystander effect in psychology, which started with the murder of Kitty Genovese back in New York. I think it was in the 60s, where a number of people just simply sat around and watched as she was brutally beaten and harmed and killed eventually. And it's a big question. Why don't people intervene when they see people being attacked or violence occurring, or when they think a murder is going to happen? And it's something social psychologists have tried to figure out for a long time. But a big part of it is that, at least in this particular case with Daybell, that if the cult is encouraging violence, then nobody's going to object to it.
Yeah. Do you want to play the other soundbite?
Yeah, well, sure.
The way that they were part of the manipulation and part of that indoctrination and getting you to be part of this needing them and being close to them and stuff like that, was their constant offering you a blessing of comfort, or offering you a blessing of something that was going to happen, so promising you something. So it was almost as if when you get that on a constant basis all the time, and then all of a sudden you don't, it's almost as if you're like, whoa, what happened there? You know what I mean? All of a sudden you feel like, oh my goodness, I have no guidance now. You see that? And I believe that I can't say how Melly was feeling at the time, but I would imagine that she was feeling like, she hadn't had any contact or anything from them since they left Vicksburg. So I remember her being in tears having that conversation.
So kind of off what you said is when she was in tears and did she or anybody ask you for their numbers? If they, well, because they knew you had them, right? Because you were the one that was calling. So did they ever say, or after the conference call when she talked and you talked to Chad and Lori, did Alex or Melanie or Ian or anybody ask you, say, hey, well, can you forward me their number? I'd like to call them and talk to them. Or was it just you that solely had their...
No, they had their number too. They had their number. If I'm not mistaken, it's probably, I can't say for sure, but I'm thinking that it was probably given to Melly that day during the call.
During one of the conference calls?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't remember. I really don't know why that kind of became like a pattern. Yeah. Like, I mean, I didn't even see it as a pattern until until you're bringing it up. I didn't even realize that it had become a pattern like that. So, and it's possible that it was part of that, manipulation, part of that, you're the contact person kind of thing, or, putting you in this. This is one thing that now that we're talking about this, one of the things that they started saying to me from the beginning was that putting me in a position of being so special. Like Lori and Chad used to say to me often, your mission is the most important one. We have to take care of you more than we have to take care of anyone else, because your mission is most important and more important than anybody else's. They always said that to me from the beginning.
Okay.
And there was, Lori would say that sometimes when we would just get together, she would, say that, oh, everybody has to, make sure that you're praying and taking care of Zulema, because her mission is the most important.
Okay.
And if they had some pretty crazy plans, I mean, now it would make sense why I would be the most important, if that's,
Do you want me to keep going?
That's good. Oh, is this okay. So.
Thank you, Debbie, so much. Thank you.
So I think that clip reiterates a lot of what we've been talking about. Just this need to feel special, the manipulation of Chad and Lori telling her constantly over and over that her mission's the most important one. So all of that's a form of indoctrination for sure. Yes. There was a question about there was a question earlier about why did Chad want Alex to marry Zulema? The reason is because that neither Alex nor Zulema could make it to the New Jerusalem, which is the post-apocalyptic world, without being married. That was part of their belief system. And so later when we talk about the plastic sheet on their honeymoon, the question is, and the detectives were wondering.
That's a well-known story. Do people want to hear that story, or do we know it? That Zulema told police in a 2021 interview that she remembered it was at the very end of the interview. It was very interesting that she was like, oh, by the way, that Alex on her wedding night in Las Vegas said they needed to drive by a store and pick up a plastic sheet so that they wouldn't get the bed dirty while he did a massage. And he had been a massage therapist until I think he lost his license. And so he didn't know how to do massages. And she said that the plastic sheet they got ended up being like a tarp. We're not talking something small. We're talking Dexter-esque. I actually love that Dateline put this in with the Dexter thing. I kind of want to take credit for that because I was talking to Shane Bishop, the producer, and he was like, what do you think is fascinating? And I said, this Zulema sheet story is MFDL. And I said, that means made for Dateline. I said, it's got Dexter vibes all over it, and he put it in. But she wondered at that point if they had plans to do something to her, Chad and Lori. And then she felt sleepy and heard Alex talking on the phone with somebody. And I think everyone is fascinated with this story. But I think the question is, did she make it up? Was she really going to be killed? Is she exaggerating? John, you do have some opinions on this story. Denise, thank you so much for your super sticker and for your kindness. And thank you for your question that we were able to read on Patreon.
Just finishing my thought about why they needed to get married, though. So that leads into the part of the answer to the plastic sheet dilemma. But so the marriage was necessary because Chad deemed it necessary to finish their mission or to accomplish their mission. And so Alex needed to marry somebody. They were hoping for Zulema, of course, because she was closely aligned with the group. And Alex took some liking to her, I think. So, but the question is, after they were married and Alex purchased this plastic sheet, is the mission now accomplished? Can he now kill her? And perhaps they wanted to kill her because she knew too much, or she was getting too close to the group, or she was starting to ask questions. She was questioning, according to Zulema, she was questioning Tammy's death and whether Alex was involved. Alex told her that he believed he was being set up as a fall guy. So, but this was before then. But Zulema, the way Zulema tells the story, I think she definitely may have escaped a mortal situation there for sure.
I agree. So in other words, there are a lot of people sharing whether they think it's true or not. To confirm, John, you think that might have been her last night?
I think it's accurate. I don't think she'd have any reason to make it up. I think she herself intuited that something was off, that she was afraid. And I have to go with those instincts. I think that she probably was in mortal danger. I think the reason she survived that would be a couple reasons. Number one is I think Alex may have actually changed his mind or pushed back on Chad a little bit. I think Chad may have wanted her to be murdered, and Alex may have questioned that. That was one. And the other would be, I don't know where they were staying in Vegas, but the logistics of murdering someone and getting the body out of the room in a major hotel would be really difficult. So I think there were a lot of risks of detection and being caught, and that probably played a role too. But it seems to me that Chad may very well have wanted Zulema dead for a lot of reasons, and the foremost being that her mission was complete. She married Alex. Now they could both go their merry way to the New Jerusalem, and why take the risk of having her around if she knew something?
There are a lot of opinions going through chat, but I actually do want to say that I agree with my husband on this one. The reason is I think the motive would simply be there was so much pressure for Zulema to marry Alex. It was being encouraged. If you read the text, again, you can find those on our Patreon account, patreon.com/hiddentruecrime. Every text sent, it's 107 pages between Zulema, Chad, and Lori. And there were so many texts back and forth encouraging Zulema and Alex to get married. It really was an arranged type of a marriage, although I think they might have fallen in love too. I won't go there, but that was part of the plan. Part of the plan was that Zulema would marry Alex, and they felt that was a big part of their belief system too, that in the next life when they're all working, because, Cammie was busy working and that's just what you do. You just go to the other side and just keep working, that they needed to be married in the next life. And I think that Zulema, the motive would be that Zulema was questioning things, or maybe they felt she was a bit of a liability and Alex was supposed to do something and changed his mind. And the reason why I also think it's possible that he could have changed his mind too is they really, really, really wanted him to be in Rexburg. And at that point, there was some changes in Alex. He moved to Arizona instead, into Zulema's home. And they did not move to Rexburg. And even in Arizona, Chad kept encouraging them to move to the house in Rexburg. And he said, I'm good. We're good. And so I think it would make sense if he changed his mind that night.
And part of the change in mind could have been Zulema, that I think Zulema didn't want to move to Rexburg. And she was influencing Alex to some degree. And Chad didn't, of course, Chad doesn't like people that don't take his directions, without any type of questioning. So I think Chad was fairly upset that they weren't moving to Rexburg and they weren't following his orders.
Right. People are mentioning at some point she was to marry David. That is a past life David. Julie Holden discovered this in her documents. That is not Melanie Gibbs David. I can't think of his last name right now. But yes, in some of the FOIA docs, there was a David she was to marry. That is not, guys, I can't believe I just forgot his name. But that is
David
not
Warwick?
Yes, thank you. I'm like waiting here for my co-host to save me. You did it. Thank you.
I just want to weigh in on what Paul is saying here, that who buys a tarp for a body massage? Right, exactly. Like that, in some ways, that's all you need to know. Why? I mean, that alone should have freaked Zulema out. Why is he putting a massive plastic tarp on the bed? And I especially if she watches Dexter, she should be really freaked out.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I don't know if she made it up either, because who would make that strange? It's a strange story to just come up with too.
Yeah. I don't. Also, she tells it with authentic emotion. I think you can tell when she's telling the story that she's almost going back there. There's some affect there, which would be a little bit of a tell that she's telling the truth. And I think she says, when she talks about how quiet he was, and she kind of runs you through those moments that were occurring, it's believable to me.
Right. What about this whole thing isn't strange? Solid point. That's why we're talking about it 2.5 years later. While we wait for the trial. And about that, I want to say, we are covering other cases. I want everyone to know, but we are going to continue covering Daybell too, as well as other cases. I'll just share this. We have an excellent interview coming soon that has to do with Daybell, and you won't want to miss it. So I'll give that teaser. Yeah, someone's saying they're out every time a tarp's involved. Scott, tarp, murder kit. Exactly. Yeah,
right. I hope so. When the tarp comes out, it's probably best to head for the exits. So yeah, I agree.
A lot of people are still talking and asking about how much she knew. And you and I have talked about that. There are some pretty damning texts, especially around the deaths of people, specifically Charles and Tammy. And I'm happy to read some of those if you want me to, or we can play something else. Or what do you want to do next, babe?
It's so tricky. It has the Melanie Gibb type feel, in the sense that at least in the interview with the detectives that were playing she's very inconsistent, and she's clearly trying to be more passive. She's clearly trying to evade responsibility, I think. There is some evidence that suggests she knew a lot more than she's letting on. So, yeah, somebody wants you to read some of them. Okay.
Hey, I'll read some of them. And somebody else asked if Zulema's still alive. She is still alive. She is. So let's start with the day Charles is murdered, which is 7/11/2019. And let's just talk all the texts that are kind of sus, you know? Zulema texted Lori twice that morning. Granted, Charles was already dead by that time. Alex shot Charles 7/11/2019 at 7:49 a.m. Alex called 911 at 8:32. Lori returned to the house at 8:48. Zulema texted Lori twice this morning. The first one was at 8:28. Oh, so look at that. Right after he was shot, before Alex called 911. She says, "I'm on my way to the temple." And then at 8:54 a.m., so right after Lori returns to the house, she writes, "I'll be in the celestial room." And then at 11:31 a.m., she writes, "As I was working on Eplos today," because Lori explained that now Charles is Eplos, he wasn't Ed Schneider, now he's Eplos, and then emphasized the H is silent, so let's get the Eplos name right. The zombie name has to be pronounced right, according to Lori. "So I was working on Eplos today in the temple. I was told he will be taken as he is. I don't know what that means. Then I was shown to only put light, the brightest light from the top and the bottom at the same time, meeting in the middle. So I've been doing that all day. 7/11. I hope today is a good day for all of this to end." I will say that when she was asked about that final text by police, because she was asked, Zulema was asked about that text message, and she told Lori that she was working on Eplos today and that he would be taken as he was, and she mentioned that she hoped that this was the day. Zulema stated that Lori had told her to work on Eplos daily. In Zulema's eyes, Charles was already dead, and she was trying to get rid of a zombie. In regards to the date of 7/11, Zulema stated that ever since that conference in St. George, the date of 7/11 was a big sign for Lori and Melanie, and Zulema reported that they always talked about this date, that maybe God was going to take him on 7/11, which is so sad. It's a special day to me too, by the way, 7/11. I get Slurpees on that day, but they're talking about getting rid of zombies. But, then you think, okay, like, was it a cast off? You were thinking that you're just going to get rid of the spirit, but no. One of Zulema's texts, a very damning text, makes it into Charles's probable cause. And the most important stuff makes it into the probable cause because they're saying this is what we are using to make the charge against Lori Vallow Daybell for murdering Charles. This is proof that he's been murdered. So when you get a text in there, you're pretty good. And it's Zulema's text to a friend named Julie Clement, who was a spiritual healer as well in Arizona and LDS. Zulema was asked how she, so here it is, 7/12, the very next day. So, business goes on as usual for her. And she's just asking to label people light or dark the day after Charles is killed. And then she writes to Julie Clement, "Oh, by the way, Eplos is gone. It was a Nephi and Laban ending. I will tell you more when I see you. And when you see Lori in person, I'm leaving for Chile on Monday. I'm just happy it's over." Well, as I've stated here before, the Nephi and Laban ending is the damning part of this text. Nephi is a prophet in the Book of Mormon scriptures that kills Laban because he is commanded of God and beheads him. So it's actual murder done in the name of God and in righteousness, So when somebody that's LDS is using that reference, it's pretty clear they realize that somebody was killed in the name of something. So, there you go. Do you want me to read the text she sent the day after Tammy died? Should I keep going? Here we go. Let's see. And as I look for this text, John, if you have any comments on that, go ahead.
Well, I think that the last one you read is pretty damning. It suggests that she knows that Charles was murdered. So she doesn't say it, obviously, but that's the problem. In the police interview, she's really evasive. She acts as if she doesn't know, she doesn't remember. There's a moment in that interview where they keep asking her about the bag, that Alex left some money with her, but he also had another bag apparently with a gun and some other items in it, like a phone. And she pretends like she doesn't know what they're talking about. They said, well, do you know about this bag? Yes, I know about it. Have you looked at the bag? Yes, I've looked at it many times. And then they say, do you know what's in it? And she says, no, I don't remember. I don't know what's in it. I mean, what? How could you just told them you looked at it multiple times. You have the bag, you know about the bag, but you don't remember what's in it? Like, that's not believable. She's not believable. It's like David Warwick just conveniently losing all his memory the night that the children, or at least the night that JJ goes missing.
Right. I agree with that. Your husband dies, your sixth husband, but your husband dies. And he leaves you a bag of money and stuff in it. And she's like having a hard time deciding what was in it or if she looked, or I know that was a very strange moment.
There's these moments throughout the whole interview. There's another moment where the police keep pressing her, the detective keeps pressing her about that Zulema appears to be the designated caller. In other words, she's the conduit through which the other members talk and get together, and she sets up these calls. So she has a lot of responsibility, right, keeping this group together, or at least getting them together on calls. And they press her about it over and over. And finally, one of the detectives asks her, why were you the designated caller? And she says, I don't know. No particular reason. I'm like, yeah. What? No, like, that's not believable. She was clear. If you read her text, she was clearly involved in this group at a much deeper level than she's telling the detectives. I think potentially that could be a nightmare for the prosecution, by the way. If she's called as a fact witness, which I suspect she will be, the defense can have a field day with some of this stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Like this, the text the day Tammy was declared dead. So I said it was the day after Tammy was murdered, but it was probably the morning of, because we've heard that she might have died around 2 a.m., according to Julie Rowe, who does have some insider info there. And then we know that hours later, the 911 call came in from Chad. Like, it's just like Charles. You wait a few hours, I guess, to call after you find your wife dead. And Chad writes a post on Facebook that morning announcing that his wife of 30 years, 49-year-old Tammy Daybell, had passed away in her sleep. Zulema writes Chad, "Hi, Chad. I just saw your post. I hope you are okay. Yesterday at the temple, I had a vision that I was helping a bride get ready and helping her with her white dress. And then I see your post today. The Lord is wonderful." So, odd text to send the day your wife has died to somebody. Chad writes her back, "Thank you, Zulema. I'm hanging in there. Our family has received overwhelming support. Yes, changes are underway. We have all felt Tammy nearby. She is very happy and already very busy." And then Zulema writes back, "Her work is underway. I'm happy for her. I'm also excited for what's next. I'm praying for you and your family. Much love and comfort to you all. I hope to see you very soon." And then Zulema is writing Lori at the same time. She writes, "Oh my goodness," one word, O-M goodness. "Oh my goodness. Did you know that that was going to happen? How are you? How are you feeling? Maybe it was you that I saw in the temple getting ready to get married just yesterday, and the girl was tiny like you." And Lori writes, "Funny, I love you." Zulema writes, "Ascended couples. Jules saw them coming soon. Nothing more powerful, she said. I love you too. And Lori wrote, that's good news. So that's interesting. Also, I want to point out that the day that someone shoots Tammy Daybell, we learned this from the FOIA documents, the day that somebody shoots at Tammy Daybell with what she thought was a BB gun, I personally think it was like a jammed gun or something.
I think she thought it was a paint gun.
She thought it was a paint gun. That's what she wrote on Facebook the next day, as she was coming home from a church meeting with the women. The day that someone shoots at Tammy Daybell, Alex texts Zulema at I think it was like at 11, and they talk on the phone for 38 minutes. And this is a little bit out of the ordinary for them, as patterns show that they usually do not communicate that late at night. And that was the night she was shot. So there's another little thing. And then all those little things, add up. How many of them are coincidence? And then I do want to share this too. 9 days after Tammy is murdered, 10/28/2019, Alex sends Zulema a picture of Chad and Lori and two other women at a restaurant. Chad and Lori are sitting next to each other, and Chad is no longer wearing his wedding ring. Zulema says, he looks way too happy. Alex responds, he escaped the warden, so it's all downhill from here. Zulema, woohoo, he's a happy man. Look at that smile. Alex, he's a little giddy. And Zulema writes, that's so cute. I'll stop, but there you go. We have 900 people. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. And please make sure you hit the like and subscribe button.
Right. Yeah. It's those inconsistencies pop up everywhere with Zulema. I think that's where there probably are some big issues about her credibility. In fact, that in the interview that the detectives did that we watched, they started with that. They started with saying, well, when you were interviewed by the Gilbert police after Alex died, you said that you'd only met Lori a couple of times. And clearly that was not honest. She had been with Lori many times, knew Lori well. They went to cast-off sessions together well before then. I mean, in watching that again, I think there's a part of me that thinks she's afraid. She's just not willing to acknowledge that. And so because she's afraid, there's some denial. She's trying to bury it. She wants to minimize her involvement in the group. And I think Melanie Gibb does something similar. I think there's fear. She's afraid she's going to get caught, or she might be implicated in this whole scheme. So she doesn't know what to do. So she's just kind of improvising on the spot, or some would call that lying. So it's a problem.
Right. Jean mentions that she thinks, in her opinion, the paintball gun was a suppressor or silencer that he'd attached to a handgun. And it was the sound of it backfiring. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Yeah. And somebody's asking, so Tammy was the warden? Yes. Tammy was a zombie named Viola, and she was also the warden. So Tylee was labeled a dark spirit or a black portal, dark portal, and then Tammy was labeled the warden. But then when they died, they allegedly respected them so much they said they're happy and on with their work. Yeah, it's very sad. Very sad. And then of course she gets married, and their honeymoon is spent with a tarp. And then a couple weeks later, Alex dies. The day after, Tammy's body is exhumed. And John, do you want to play that part of the video, or what other videos do we have? I'm not keeping track of. I did all the editing on our sound bites, but I'm not keeping track of where we are, because we do have a very important moment in that interview to share as well.
Do you have that? Did you use that as a sound bite?
Uh-huh. It's a long sound bite, but it's important. So I shared it.
At the very end?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Should we play that now?
Sure.
So now we're to the point where, again, Charles has died. Zulema knows about that. And Tammy has died. Zulema knows about that. The children are missing. Alex has told Zulema they needed to get rid of a dark portal. And then now her own husband is days away from death, and she's recounting talking to Alex because she seems to have some concerns. And here she is telling the police this story in April of 2021. And actually, we have one other soundbite before that. Should I go straight to that, or should we play this?
When I realized that my biggest hurdle had been that I wanted other people's attention and I wanted other people's acceptance. And I really, and that was my biggest limitation there. And once in a while, it will want to creep up.
Yeah.
And I would want someone to like me and accept me. And then I'm gently reminded that, no, that's not where it's at, sweetheart. You don't need that.
So that's interesting. That was not the soundbite we were going to play, but that came before it. I didn't know if you were keeping this track of the soundbites we have in order, John, but that was an important soundbite probably to talk about because she was saying
that was one that was relevant to the soundbite where she says that she was getting blessings and felt special. So
she said her biggest limitation is that she needs attention from other people
or wants to be liked. And so I think that was 2016. I think she's showing us that in 2020, 2019, that nothing's changed, right? That all these issues that she identified in 2016 as being pertinent or limiting to herself are still there in 2019 and 2020. So hence why she joined this group, hence why she became a part of a cult.
Right. And Julie Holden just said these earlier sound bites from 2016 make me realize how primed Zulema was for Chad to swoop in and take advantage of her. Let's see what's next. So this might be the blessing one.
Biggest success is to be able to relate to people at a level that perhaps not everyone can do. Because when I tell you I know pain, I know pain.
Mm-hmm.
When I tell people I know what it is like to be depressed, I know what it is like to be depressed. When I tell people I know what it is like to be abused, I do. I'm not making it up.
Right.
And when I tell people that you are in the depths of despair and I know what that feels, I know what that feels. I'm not making it up. And I bring it with me. And I have this deep connection with people. And I'm able to connect with them in a very short period of time.
So do you want to mention that one? I mean, she was sexually abused as a child and pretty severely. And so she is saying she knows pain.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I think obviously she did experience a lot of trauma and a lot of pain. But her solution to that seems to have been to give herself over completely to God. And while that may work for some people, I think the limitation of that is the pain still needs to be addressed. The pain is still there. If you try to gloss over that pain with something transcendent, you could call it God, a higher power. She calls it a source. When you try to do that, I think you're still left. You're still left with the pain. You still haven't really resolved whatever it is you're trying to resolve. Not that you can in the end fully, but I think in some ways Zulema's showing here that she has this pain, but she's running away from it. She's not diving into it. She never has. She jumped into the source or God or whatever as a solution to her pain. And you can see that that's not a big step. That's not a far step away from daybell, from a cult. You can see sort of that propensity towards easy solutions, that if you're experiencing a lot of pain, then let's join a cult. Or let's become immersed in this really crazy belief system that'll take me away from having to think about the real pain that I'm dealing with. So
someone is asking if you see disassociation in Zulema's response. Sorry, that's not the one I have pinned from Lynn Butler, but Carola is asking that in chat. Do you see disassociation in Zulema's responses? or that she doesn't have her own identity? That's what Diva is asking.
Yeah, it's a good question. There's an argument to be made that most trauma victims and survivors engage in some level of dissociation. So. I think there is some dissociation there for sure. It's a really good question. Usually dissociation goes hand in hand with trauma to some degree. So yes, I think it's a way for her to distance herself from her pain and to remove herself from the reality of her past, the pain of her past.
I like what Karen Michelle just shared here. Intuition as a trauma response is not a gift. It's a coping mechanism and a defense. I know learning that about myself freed me from being as vulnerable to the flatterers. I love that.
Yeah,
right.
That's right, exactly. And that's a great insight, because that's precisely what Zulema is calling her healing. Her gift as a healer is intuition. That's her gift. And
the irony is she didn't have great intuition.
Right.
Because of her trauma. Right.
Yeah, right. She didn't have great intuition about the people she was associating with. But yes, I agree. It's in some ways that clip you played from her podcast is really critical in terms of understanding Zulema, because she does have pain, no doubt. She probably has a lot of pain from her past, but she really hasn't. I don't think she's really dealt with it in a very healthy manner, and so hence why she's been married 6 times and joined multiple cults, and she can't get on track with her life.
Yeah, I love that. Intuition as a trauma response is not a gift. It's a coping mechanism and a defense. Lynn Butler, thank you so much. She asks, how can we help people with gifts understand that a scheme is not a vision? I don't know. That's it's a great question.
I'm not sure that we could ever get Zulema to understand that question, or somebody like Zulema or the Zulemas.
Yeah.
It takes a certain amount of wisdom to make that distinction, and wisdom is not a word.
Maybe actually what Karen Michelle said is a good answer to that. I think understanding the tuition, from a trauma response, or these people that have these gifts, I think maybe to say they're not gifts, they're defense mechanisms. That's one way.
Or if you completely immerse yourself in an ideology, and then you're calling it healing, it's not addressing the real issue or the underlying issue.
Yeah. Let's go back to some more of these sound bites. We have a few to get through.
Yeah.
I don't know what my brother and my sister need. You taught me that. I don't know what they need, but God does. And He knows 100% of the time. And if I can just plug myself in, I can just plug myself to the source. The source. Source will guide me. And the source will tell me exactly what I'm supposed to say. And I can do that.
You did want me to cut that. Source is God, by the way. They use source as a term of God. Source, I don't know, but God knows, and He'll lead me and He'll trust me. I just have to turn it in 100%. It's almost like she's giving up any of her free agency or her intuition or anything. She has to say, I actually don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to trust the source and follow along. I'm a follower.
Right, which giving up her agency, by the way, you can see a lot of that in the interview, in the detective interview. So she doesn't ever really commit or take responsibility for many of her answers. So, and you can see that attitude there and that response and on the podcast from 2016. She's already showing us who she is. She's showing that she really believes that if you just plug into the source, all your problems will go away. So that's all you have to do. It's that simple. I wish I had that plug, by the way. I don't know. I've been looking for that plug for many, many years. So can I go pick one up at Ace Hardware?
Right.
Lowe's?
Let's go back to the conversation that you had with Alex.
Okay. Before we continue, this is the soundbite that I introduced a little bit ago. This is a pivotal moment, and it's right before Alex died, after everyone else has passed away, and Zulema is maybe getting some intuition and asking some questions.
When Tammy's body is being exhumed. Do you remember that conversation where you said you had confronted him and said, Alex, are you going to have anything to do with this? Why would you think that he may have something to do with it?
So, Lori and Chad had called that day, and they were the ones that told us that they were exhuming her body, and the way they were talking, they weren't really saying anything like, oh, we're worried or anything like that. It was more of like a feeling that I had that was like, this is really weird. Like, shouldn't they be like having this kind of reaction type of thing? You know, not like so nonchalantly, oh, they're exhuming her body today type of thing. And I was like, why are they so not nonchalantly about it? Like, are they hiding something? Did they do something? Did they not do something? And so that's why I wanted to. I knew that if I asked Lori and Chad about anything, they probably wouldn't say anything. But I thought that if they had been doing something, if he had done anything, Alex would probably tell me. So that's why I pressured him. I'm like, would you have anything to do with this? Like, if they assume this body, and are they gonna find anything? Did you have anything to do with this? And he said no. But I mean, I don't know if that was true or not. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. And the reason I ask is because, let's say, if my wife gets a call and they say one of her friends is being exhumed, that wouldn't be a question I would ask my wife is, did you have anything to do with this? That wouldn't even cross my mind. Do you know what I mean? It would be more like, hey, we're telling you it's getting exhumed.
Right.
Information-wise, this is what's going on. So that's why I wanted you to maybe expand a little bit on maybe why you thought or suspected Chad and Lori may have done something to Tammy, or that maybe Alex had known about something or had done something.
So remember that they were saying that Tammy had become a zombie. Mm-hmm. Remember that? Yep. And they were talking. I don't know who was saying who, because they always like, oh, I was told. Lori would say, I was told, and then Chad would say very little, and then it was kind of communicated through her. So it's kind of hard to tell who the information was coming from. But they were saying that Tammy was supposed to die on her trip to Utah. She was supposed to have he had seen it in a vision that she was going to die in a car accident in the way there, or something was going to happen that she was going to pass away. Okay. And then when she didn't pass away, then what they were saying was that she actually did pass away, but what happened was that she was taken over by an evil spirit, and then they were that she had become a zombie. Okay, so in the back of my mind, here I am thinking, okay, they said the same thing about Charles, right? And then Charles ended up being shot, right? I'm thinking, okay, you guys are not trying to say that you guys are going to do something physically to people who are, who are turning into zombies, according to them. That was my thought.
Okay. So, refresh my memory again. What was Alex's response to your question to him?
So he sat back and and pressed his back towards back of the bed, the headboard, and he goes, "No." That's it. There's no answer after that. Nothing else. And I was waiting for him to say something else, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, are you going to say anything else? And he's like, no. Like, okay. So I thought when he seemed so sure of his answer, I was like, well, okay, well, then he didn't have anything to do with this.
Okay. And is that the same conversation that's the same conversation you kind of got after, right? And we're pretty, maybe forceful is not the right word, but aggressive towards him as far as, tell me what's going on.
Yeah, because that was when because right after so then I pressed for another answer, and he tells me no, right? So then so then I stand up and I start walking away because I'm like, I don't know what to think at this point. And that's when he said, I think I am being their fall guy. And I'm like, the fall guy for what? What is it? Tell me. What is it that they're trying to pin on you? What did they do? And he just wouldn't say anything else. And so then I get frustrated again because he's not answering my question. So I turn around and I'm going to walk away again, because I'm just so frustrated that he's not saying anything. And that's when he tells me, either I am a man of God or I am not.
Either I am a man of God or I am not. And it sounds like that was the day Tammy's body was exhumed. If that's accurate, he died the next day.
Yeah. The big question here is, and I've been looking at some of the questions you've been posting, but is this believable? Right? Does this seem in the least believable? She's very contradictory. Her texts obviously tell a very different story than what she's talking about here. Is it believable that Alex did that, said nothing to her? I mean, maybe the detectives want to believe it, but I think the defense could really tear her up with that stuff.
Right. People are saying no, she's not.
Yeah, right. Her credibility is a big question. But when Alex says, I think I'm being the fall guy, he's basically telling her what happened. So I don't know why she didn't press him further. Maybe she felt like she wouldn't get anywhere. Is she telling the truth? But essentially, he's admitting his culpability when he says that.
He is. And he was, as someone's pointing out, Weekend Widow, he was dubbed the protector in this group by Chad through his patriarchal blessing and other things. Everyone knew he was the protector. So for the protector to be possibly made the fall guy.
And I think you're going to see that in the trial. I think Alex is going to bear the brunt of a lot of these murders. I wouldn't be surprised to see some version of a defense consisting of Alex did this. We didn't know he was going to do it. He was a breakaway, crazy serial killer that we couldn't control or something like that. I don't know. But does Zulema know? Does Melanie Gibb know? right? They know more than they're telling us. Let's just say that.
I believe so. I believe that she knows more than she's sharing. I have to ask, do they want to imagine that they don't know more? Well, let me take it further. To me, in reading the text that I read, she understands people are dying.
Right.
But her response to that, or her explanation, is, well, I thought they were zombies. I mean, doesn't that put her in the same boat as Lori Vallow if she was a true believer? I mean, I guess if she wasn't part of the plotting, but is that an excuse to not be culpable? And
I think Zulema is a true believer to some degree. And then she, obviously, when all this goes down, she's not a true believer. So does that mean she was duped? Here's a question. Didn't she take a plea? As far as I know, Zulema, if you're talking about Zulema, I don't believe that Zulema has been charged with anything, as far as I know.
Yeah, she hasn't been. She hasn't been.
I have lost any compassion for this group of people, says T. Diva. Yeah, it's it's not, that's not an unreasonable stance. I think that when I heard Zulema's podcast and when she described her sexual abuse, I think I did feel some empathy for her. I feel like Zulema is someone who's very lost, similar to Julie Rowe, not as crazy as Julie Rowe, but similar to Julie Rowe. And there's mental health issues, probably severe mental health issues. And it's hard for me not to feel compassion for someone like that. As crazy as it is to get wrapped up in this type of cult or whatever it is, I think it's, for me at least, I think it's still not hard to feel some empathy towards someone like Zulema.
Yeah. Finca, Rowe, Gibb, and Zulema are all lost, and I think that is a great way to explain this group. I want to share one thing too that I find fascinating. We've heard through many sources, and of course we don't know. We've never met her or talked to her, but the word on the daybell circuit street is that Lori is still a true believer. And if that's the case, is she the only one left that is a true believer? If Chad's turning on her, then I think he's got some doubt in the whole thing. And if Zulema now is saying she wasn't a true believer, even though she was texting about zombies being killed on 7-Eleven and performing earthquakes and heavy periods too. I mean, those are in the text too. Again, you can find those on our Patreon account, patreon.com, Hidden True Crime. But and then we know Melanie Gibb is denying any belief in it. Oh, she never totally believed it, she said, even though she called Lori Daybell mom, in text, because they were mother and daughter in a past life. But now, oh no, heaven forbid, I didn't really believe it. So that begs the question, is Lori the only true believer in this?
That's a good question. I
know there's no answer maybe, but I just want to throw that out there.
Well, Julie Rowe arguably is a true believer in something similar. I mean, it's different, but
I don't know. I mean, even then though, we recently talked about her and there's, I think, a part of her that doesn't believe, and she's thinking to herself, oh, I need, as Anna, our interviewee Anna said, she was like, man, I need to make some money. Time to do some energy healing sessions. So
right. There was a part of that introduction to the Zulema interview that you didn't play, and Zulema says, she tells the detectives that she's kind of reflecting out loud, and she says, how did I get involved with people like this? How did I think anything like this? How could I have been deceived so much? So she's asking questions. This is in the first 2 to 3 minutes of the same interview. And right, those are good questions. But the issue is, to me, why isn't she acknowledging more? She's essentially saying that she did believe this stuff, but now she's telling detectives a different story, right? Why doesn't she divulge more? And Melanie, same thing could be said about Melanie Gibb, I think. Maybe they will. Maybe they will at trial. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those types of questions, by the way, definitely lead to the conclusion that she's not a true believer anymore, that she says she was deceived, or she thought she was deceived, and she wants to know why.
That Zulema wasn't. We have a babysitter. We have to go get our son, which is why we started early tonight. Again, the only downside of having two hosts that are husband and wife. Other than that, it's wonderful. So we need to end now, but thank you everyone for being here. There are over 1,000 people in chat right now. Babe, he doesn't look. He only sees what I post. And so anyway, thank you everyone for being here. We would love to hear your continued conversation and thoughts about this, because we've left a lot on the table in chat and in comments. Sorry, not in chat. We're in chat now. Continue this in comments, because I'm loving what I'm seeing here. And let your friends know. Give us a like, please. Please subscribe. Again, we're going to be covering many cases here at Hidden True Crime. And for those that want all of the FOIA docs, patreon.com/Hidden True Crime. If you want the text messages we discussed today and all of those 106 pages, you can head there. We posted those today. That podcast from 2016 we played, we also have that on our Patreon account. So with that being said, thank you everyone for being here. And thank you, Dr. Babe. I love your haircut. You look great. So
I'm glad to be here. I want to end with one little teaser that we didn't play in the sound bites, but at the very, very end of the Zulema interview, around 1 hour, 54 minutes, give or take, Zulema is simply reflecting. The detectives get her to reflect on things a little bit. And she says something, this isn't an exact quote, but this is a paraphrase. She says essentially, Alex couldn't kill me. So she's referring to the tarp incident. Alex couldn't kill me, but he went through to kill himself. So
you're right. Thank you for sharing that.
So what a moment, right? I mean, Zulema is essentially saying that Alex didn't die of natural causes, that he killed himself. This is coming from Zulema, right? So why didn't the detectives pick up on that? They just sort of like skipped over that, like, okay, see ya. But I mean, what does she know about his death? Did she participate in it? If he did kill himself, was it an assisted suicide? Did she help him? I don't know. That opened the door to a lot of questions to me. So we don't have time to discuss that, but I just wanted to drop that little nugget so that we can think about it down the road, because we're out of time here. But if you guys get a chance, I wanted to play that, but maybe we'll return to it. But I can't. It's a moment that apparently they just didn't hear or overlooked. But wow, what an interesting moment.
Right. His own widow doesn't necessarily think he died of natural causes. And again, this is in 2021, well after the autopsy result.
But again, maybe this will come out in trial. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe that'll show up again. But there's certainly, if it is going to show up again, there's certainly not indicating that it's anything other than a natural death.
Yeah. I have my suspicions, I'll be honest, and I don't doubt the autopsy that he died of a pulmonary embolism, but I wonder what caused it. I have my suspicions, and I think I always will, and I want to throw out again with a little bit of tea here at the end. that, and I texted our babysitter. I said we were on our way, by the way. So they think we're on the way. I did that text, the whole we're on our way text when you're not really on your way. So I just sent that text. So we got to go. But Eldon Clausen, who I have strong suspicions of, a neighbor of Chad Daybell. You can hear about him in our interview with Bernadine, the neighbor of Chad Daybell. He died of a pulmonary embolism, and blood was coming from his mouth. He never had an autopsy, but that's a sign of bleeding in the lungs. Tammy had red foam coming from her mouth, which is a sign of pulmonary embolism. That is not the cause of her death that I know of, but I do want to say this. I know this, and we'll learn more later. I can't tell you too much now, but I'll just say this. Chad changed his story. He told that it was a heart failure, and he told someone later, weeks later, that it was a pulmonary embolism, that she died of a pulmonary embolism. You'll know more about that another time. And so it's hard for me to not only look at the coincidence of his death, but also the cause of his death and be content with his death being natural. So I'm going to listen to Zulema in that, at that end of the interview. I'll just share.
All right. Thank you. We need to wrap it up.
We need to be on our way. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.